everybody who's online. I'm Anna Eliatambi from Staff Welfare, and it's good to welcome you all to a little event around World Mental Health Day. And thank you for closing the door. So World Mental Health Day is a good chance for us to stop and think about our own mental health, that of colleagues, and how the organization's approaching mental health. And we have some offers for you to think about in terms of what constitutes good self-care. So Joe is going to talk about positive psychology, because that's really important. Craig will discuss well-being. I'll look at mental health and mental illness, because that's also an important part of us in terms of our groups, as individuals, as families, as communities. And then finally, Javier will talk about diversity and inclusion, because that's also an important part of mental health and well-being collectively. So I'm just going to hand over to Joe to talk about positive psychology, and then Craig will talk about well-being, and Javier will talk about diversity and inclusion, and I will talk about mental health and well-being.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. So hi, I'm Joe Rispoli, GSAC Chair, and I'd like to talk to you for the next few minutes about positive psychology. So traditionally, psychology has been about reducing trauma and treating mental illness. But today I'd like to explore a little bit more a different aspect of psychology. What makes people flourish? And that's where positive psychology comes into the picture. It's all about thriving and being engaged at work and in all aspects of our lives. What it's not about is putting on a happy face all the time, or pretending, or not being authentic or genuine. So life can be hard for all of us at times. There are challenges that we experience, there are disappointments, and that's inevitable. But the research has shown that positive psychology strategies and skills can help us to overcome those difficulties, those challenges, and stressful moments in life. And so I want to pose a question. How can we flourish through positive psychology? So I'd like to share with you over the next few minutes a model of well-being called PERMA. And it has 5 core elements, which I'll break down for you now. And all the elements can be applied to all aspects of our daily lives, but I'm going to particularly focus on the workplace. So P stands for positive emotions. So positive emotions make us feel good when we essentially are consistently engaging in positive thinking. So when we're able to set aside our stresses and our immediate needs on a daily basis, then we can experience a wider range of thought processes and actions. So it's not as limiting. So if you're constantly focusing or concentrating on the negativity in your circumstances, it's going to limit your ability to think of the bigger picture and to see things from different angles and perspectives, which in turn means that it's difficult for us to identify potential solutions. And then the problems fester and become worse and worse. So that's why positive emotions are important. Some examples of positive emotions are things like, and there are hundreds of them, but things like joy, love, serenity, contentment, even interest, all types of positive emotions. So although it's not easy at all, it's important that we try to put in effort so that we can experience more and focus more on positive emotions, also in the workplace, and especially in our stressful and difficult times. The second one is E, which stands for engagement or flow. This is when we're completely absorbed, completely and totally absorbed in an activity, and it plays to our strengths. So right now, I'm sort of in flow, because I'm completely absorbed in what the messages I want to convey to all of you in this presentation. So I'm sort of in a state of flow. So essentially, flow is when you've identified and applied your different strengths to specific tasks. So it's when your greatest strengths meet and match your biggest challenges. Let me give you an example. A donor, a very important donor, comes to you and says, you have to develop a high-quality, solid proposal in the next 2 days. That's going to be challenging, right? However, let's say your strengths are writing ability and critical analysis, and you also have in-depth knowledge of the subject matter for the proposal. In the end, it's going to be interesting and enjoyable, most likely, as a task, because you have that knowledge and you have those strengths. It's playing to your strengths. At the same time, it's a big challenge to do that within 2 days for a demanding donor. When working on the proposal, you're likely to get into a state of flow as a result, where you lose your sense of time and you sort of lose yourself in the activity. So you can really concentrate on what you're doing and be engaged in terms of the material and what you're working on. Okay, so that's the second one. The third one is R for relationships. The focus here in positive psychology is on authentic connections with other people. And they should be based on and rooted in mutual trust and respect. So I emphasize the word authentic. If the connections with people are not genuine, then that's really useless. That's actually counterproductive. So in terms of relationships, an example could be spending time, quality time with family and friends. And that's been reported to lessen depression and anxiety, also to improve mental and physical health, you engage in healthier behaviors as a result, and there's a whole range of other positive outcomes that can result from such relationships. So in the workplace, social connections and happiness is also very critical. So if you're working in a team, for instance, it's so important that you're forging positive, honest, and trusting relationships with your colleagues. And that means also participating in team events, supporting each other, actively listening to one another, communicating effectively with each other. These are some examples in the workplace. The M is the fourth one. It's meaning and accomplishment. So here, it's about striving to discover all those moments of meaning in our daily lives. And also, understanding and recognizing that there are many different ways in which we can have a purposeful life. So many people have said to me, I'm trying to discover my ultimate higher purpose in life. I wanted to identify what it is. But you know, there are higher purposes in life, but there are also mini moments of meaning, as they're called in positive psychology. Mini purposes that we experience on a daily basis, right? So this is also what positive psychology teaches us. It's not just about one purpose, but it's about our daily lives. And so in our case, all the tasks that IOMers engage in contribute to, they're basically meaningful because they contribute to supporting migrants, to supporting communities, and to supporting governments to serve migrants as well. So those are meaningful moments. The last one is A, which stands for accomplishment. There are three main components to accomplishment: effort, passion, and perseverance. So in terms of this, it really involves working toward and reaching your goals. And that means you need to have challenges at present and also plan future goals in order to have accomplishment. So in the workplace, let's say you should reflect on, recognize, and appreciate your own successes and your team's successes and accomplishments as well. So, in conclusion, what I would say is that people who work on these 5 core elements of PERMA, positive emotions, engagement or flow, relationships, meaning or purpose, and accomplishment, they are reported to be mentally and physically healthier, to have higher life satisfaction, to be more peaceful, to be more productive at work and more engaged at work, to be more active and involved in their communities, and they have a higher life expectancy, so they tend to live longer as a result. Ultimately, there's no one formula for living a happy and fulfilling life. But positive psychology, and PERMA in particular, offer us tools to be able to live our best lives. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to discussing this further with all of you in the room today. We have plenty of books on all these tables, articles for you to take. We have very active discussions in the morning. For those of you in the field, we have a chat box as well if you want to write into the chat box after our presentations. Or in the coming weeks and months, please do share your thoughts, your views, and your questions with me, with any GSAC member, with Anna as the Staff Welfare Officer, with Javier as the Diversity and Inclusion Officer, with SDL, and so on. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for participating, for coming if you're here at headquarters, or for dialing in if you're in the field. And thanks, Joe and Anna, for setting this up. My name is Craig Murphy, and I work here at headquarters as a representative for the GSAC. What I'd like to do is just to talk to you a little bit about one of the topics that's already been touched on, which is well-being. Now, well-being is obviously many different interpretations, many different definitions. One of them is the state of being comfortable or healthy, happy with your situation in life. When one feels content or curious, when one has a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, being a part of something, or feeling in control of one's life as much as one can, this is generally described as well-being. But again, there's not a universal definition. It's specific to each person. Another interpretation of well-being is that it's an assessment of one's quality of life according to the criteria set by each individual. So what might be wellness or well-being for one person is certainly not what another person would describe, and that's okay. Typically, well-being is defined by looking at indicators of physical health, but not exclusively. Also psychological state, personal beliefs, social interactions, social relations, and the network with which you are a part of. Now, all of these things that I've been describing, when these things reduce, or when they decrease, or when they go away, of course, you see the same thing happen to your wellness. Your wellness, your state of well-being, similarly reduces. So why is it important to consider these things? Why is it important to be self-aware of your state of well-being? And how do we do that? At the risk of sounding too obvious, I feel that it's a good thing to feel good. If you feel good, you're able to accomplish a lot of these other things that are indicators for wellness. You're able to fit in. Your life is much more enjoyable, etc. Now, from an organizational perspective or from an office and work perspective, often wellness is tied to productivity, output, teamwork, reduction in absenteeism, and all of these things, which is, of course, applicable and relevant to IOM and extremely important. But I would encourage us to look beyond that. And maybe before looking at these institutional benefits of wellness, let's look at ourselves. Let's look at how much better it is to get up in the morning to go to work, how much easier it is to interact with people, to accomplish your daily goals in personal and professional life when you have a reasonable state of well-being and when you're aware of it. Conversely, when your physical and mental health goes down, all of these things, getting through the day, through the week, accomplishing your goals, your responsibilities, of course, become compromised, become much more difficult. So how do we do this? How do we maintain wellness? How do we ensure that we have a reasonable state of well-being? Well, there's a very rich and expansive body of literature on these topics that can be found with a quick internet search or going to the library, looking at some of the resources around in this room. I'll talk quickly about two of them. One is work-life balance, and the other is stress management. These are two techniques, sort of things to be aware of that can contribute ultimately to the larger goal of wellness. Now, I'll also preface this by saying many of us are working in the field in hardship locations, in remote locations, or working in an emergency context. Of course, maintaining a work-life balance in those situations, implementing stress management in those situations is much more difficult. But I just encourage you to not put it aside completely. Because if you do, if you think, oh, I'm in an emergency, I can't balance my life, or I can't worry about stress now because I have to accomplish this, there's a crisis, a humanitarian situation. Yes, we all know we've worked in those situations, but it will catch up with you. So please, take time, even when you're in those situations, to take advantage of R&R, to take advantage of the end of the day, to have some quiet time, or to do something that you enjoy. Work-life balance means something, it's different to every person. Perhaps working long hours and not taking a break or not taking a lunch, working late into the night is your thing, and you like that, and you can feel balanced. There's plenty of people like that. If that is you and you feel balanced and you're able to accomplish the other things outside of work, that is fine, and that would be your work-life balance. It's a perceived state. Work-life balance is a perceived state in which only you know when your life is or is not balanced. It's a state of equilibrium in which the demands of your personal life, your professional life, and family life or social life are equal. In terms of stress management, I call your attention to the great work that Staff Welfare has done. On the internet, there are a number of modules that you can go through, and you can click on lots of different resources that will help you teach you much more specifically and in detail than I have time for now. Also, SDL, through their iLearn, we have a booth here. And there's a number of courses, modules, and things as well that are very useful for looking at stress management techniques. When you have a situation of stress, how to react, or maybe some things to do immediately, but also looking at the longer term, how to develop lifestyles that are more appropriate for overall stress reduction. Finally, I'll talk a little bit about myself. I feel like my work-life balance is, at the moment, pretty good. It's something that I've sort of had to work towards, and largely that's a product of I have so many interests, and I have lots of things that I like to do, that I enjoy doing, and that I have to do after work. So in order for me to accomplish those things, I've really tried to maintain a fairly rigorous or strict schedule and stick to it. Often I can, sometimes I cannot. I often have the good fortune of my current job, my supervisor, my role here allows for that. Some other positions or other times in my career, and maybe in yours, it's not as easy, but take advantage of it when you can. One of the things that I like to do, you may have seen me in the mornings coming in or at lunch, is to go running. Running is one of the things that I use to accomplish both goals, both the work-life balance as well as stress management. I find that they sort of feed into each other. Along the same lines, I also try to set goals. Nothing to do with IOM, looking far into the future, months ahead. I register for a lot of races. I'm registering for some marathons already in the summer of 2020, and I set goals where I will train for those. And when I do the training and when I eventually do the races, I feel like I've accomplished something. I've done something totally unrelated to IOM, but it certainly helps me when I come in the door and I'm going to work at IOM, or when I go home and I'm working on my personal life. So I encourage you not to start running, but to do what you like to do. It doesn't have to be running. It happens to be my thing, but there's so many things. There's lots of resources out there. But I guess the last message is that find something that you like to do. Whatever it is outside of work, and do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Joe, for talking about positive psychology and well-being, which are very important for all of us to think about in terms of how we have them in our lives, how we're looking after ourselves. But for some of us, there will be those times when the balance goes. Either quickly or suddenly we find ourselves out of kilter with our lives. We may develop a small mental health problem or a larger one, and that's not a sign of that person who develops a mental health problem being less than anybody else. It is just that at that point in their life becomes too much. And that is often hidden. It's not the person is sometimes not excluded, they're not included. They may find it difficult to talk to colleagues, or they may find it difficult to acknowledge. And it's a shame that it's like that, and I think we could do more individually and collectively to think about how we can include people who have mental health problems, because some of us will have and have had mental health problems. In terms of getting help for mental health problems, there are different things that people can do. And the first real big step that anybody can take is to stop and acknowledge that there is an issue that needs to be dealt with, whether it's small or whether it's large. Because especially as adults, we're very good at pretending that everything is okay, and we just cruise on, and really we're not helping ourselves, we're probably not helping our friends, our colleagues or families. So that's a really big first step. And then it's worth thinking about who can I talk to around this. Is it someone I trust? Is it a partner? Is it a family friend? Is it a trusted colleague? Or if you want to talk to a counselor or somebody, sometimes people also use the internet to learn more about anxiety or depression or substance misuse. That's good. There is a lot of information available. I would only say just be careful about what you're looking at and paying attention to, because some of the information is not right, it's not correct, and people can be misled. So if you do want to go down that route, then please make sure you're looking at a trusted resource. On that table there is some information on good resources that you could use. And then sometimes it helps for people to come and talk to a counsellor, such as myself, in a confidential manner. And then finally, some people do need time away from their lives in a residential facility so that they can take that rest, they can get the professional help they need, and then they come back into their lives and also work, and we can also be more inclusive. It is just, this is what happens to some of us some of the time. It's nothing more, nothing less than that. So it's worth thinking about how we can think about being more inclusive of each other and being more okay with our differences. Because as I said this morning, I don't know any normal people and I don't know any perfect people. So thank you.
Hello, so it's my turn. My name is Javier Orellana. I work in Human Resources in charge of diversity and inclusion. Before talking to you about specifically diversity and inclusion, I will pick up on something that Joe mentioned, which is iLearn. It's another one of the resources that we have at your disposal. And today we checked, for example, and in iLearn, IOM's learning platform, you can find courses such as time, stress, and anger management training, stress management and well-being for leaders, handling stress, understanding how to deal with stress, understanding and expressing your anger positively, controlling your emotions, and many others. So if you want to do something and to commemorate Mental Health Day, which is today, you can start by logging in through the intranet to iLearn and starting your journey in understanding and taking courses. So let's talk about diversity and inclusion. A famous diversity and inclusion practitioner explains diversity as being invited to the party, and inclusion as being invited to dance. So I find that's quite a good explanation, but it has evolved, and now we say that diversity, yes, it is to be invited to the party, but inclusion should be even more than just being invited to dance. It should be about being invited to choose the music, being part of the party planning, and so on and so forth. So this is just to give you an image of what is the conception of diversity and inclusion at IOM and what we are seeking to achieve. We are seeking to be at the forefront and leaders in the UN system in terms of HR practices related to diversity and inclusion. We are looking at policies, processes, outreach, induction, and about how to retain the staff, the employees, the talent that are part of IOM. The final goal, of course, is to have a global team of close to 20,000 people that we are now, who are all working together for the goal of assisting migrants around the world. If you would like more information about diversity and inclusion, you can find it online in our public webpage, iom.int/diversity. This link is now mentioned in every vacancy announcement so that candidates, people who are interested in applying for IOM, look at this and decide if their values are aligned with the values of the organization and if this is a workplace that's suitable for them. And at the same time to attract people who may feel like, perhaps the IOM is not a place for someone like me, which I've heard many times. People self-censoring and thinking that because they have a disability, because they are gay, lesbian, trans, or because of other characteristics, they will not be welcome. Because their nationality also. Somebody recently asked, but they wouldn't hire someone of my nationality. Also, you can find information on the intranet, where you can find the HRM section, and specifically information on diversity and inclusion. I draw your attention to the pages on flexible working arrangements, which are another measure that we have in place to help you achieve work-life balance and well-being in the end. You will find concrete examples of how people can use flexible working arrangements in their work. What is next for us and for all of us at IOM, but particularly for us at HRM? We are starting to work a lot more on disability because the UN system as a whole has made huge commitments on disability. This year, the UN launched a disability inclusion strategy that IOM has to report on every year from next year onwards. Of course, the work on LGBTI issues will continue, including training, policies, and more. Updating of policies such as the parental leave, health insurance, and others, so that they are truly inclusive and cater to the current needs of society. Working on gender diversity and gender parity, of course. Geographic diversity, keeping in mind that our offices and our organization should ideally have a wide diversity of nationalities and north-south balance, as well as ethnic diversity, particularly important in many of our country offices. And finally, multilingualism, which is another one big commitment and something that HR is paying more attention increasingly. In the end, our intention and our wish is that everybody at IOM can bring their whole selves to work, they can feel included, they can feel welcome, and that in the end they can be happy at all times and healthy. Thanks.